We are going to talk about the properties of mathematics today. And there are there are 7 of them that we're going to discuss today. All right, so the first 2 are the ones that we are most familiar with. The commutative property of addition. When 2 numbers are added together, the sum is the same, regardless of the order of the numbers. So for example, if I have 3 plus 6, that is going to equal 6 plus 3. I'm just switching the order of the numbers. 3 plus 6 is 9. 6 plus 3 is 9. I can say 7 plus 8 is equal to 8 plus 7. All I did was change the order of the number, but the answer is the same. 15 equals 15. If I do an algebraic one, which is with variables, I can have a plus b, which represents any numbers we want them to, and that's going to equal b plus a. So the commutative property of addition is just switching the order of the numbers, but the answers are going to be the same. The commutative property of multiplication. When you multiply 2 numbers, the product is the same regardless of the order. Now I underline the word order here because this is going to be important when we look at the next 2 properties. So I can say 3 times 4 is equal to 4 times 3. 3 times 4 is 12. 4 times 3 is 12. 7 times 5 is going to equal 5 times 7. Okay, we're just flipping the order, and the answers will be the same. And again, I can say A times B, and that's going to equal B times A. Now, we do not have a commutative property for subtraction or division because those values would be the same. So for subtraction, for example, if I said 4 minus 2 is equal to 2 minus 4, does that make sense? 4 minus 2 is equal to 2, and 2 minus 4 is equal to negative 2. So there is no commutative property of subtraction. How about division? What if I did 4 divided by 2 and switch the order to 2 divided by 4? Here I'm going to get 2, but 2 divided by 4 is actually equal to 1/2. So there is no properties, commutative property for a subtraction or division. Now we have the associative property. Now this is where I underlined another important word here, and that's grouping, okay? So when multiplying 3 or more numbers, the product is the same regardless of the grouping. So this is where we're going to bring in a set of parentheses. So if I say 6 times 1 times 2, and I'm going to multiply 6 times 1 first, is that going to be the same as 6 times 1 times 2 with the parentheses in a different grouping? So 6 times 1 I would do first with the parentheses, and that's 6, and 6 times 2 is 12. On this side, I would do 1 times 2 first because of the parentheses. 1 times 2 is 2, times 6 is 12. So the answer is still going to be the same on both sides, regardless of which grouping I multiply first. So the only thing that moves here are the parentheses. So if I do 7 times 8 times 2, so it would be 7 times 8 is 56, and 56 times 2 is 112. So these are going to be exactly the same regardless of where I put the parentheses. So if we do it as algebraically, it would be 8a times b times c. And if I multiply a times b first, and the second grouping would be times c. The most important thing that we have to know here are keep the numbers in the same order. The only thing that changes are the parentheses. That's the only thing that changes are the parentheses. All right, when adding 3 or more numbers, so it's same thing. We're going to do 8 plus 6 plus 1. And just depending on which grouping I would do first, if I had 8 plus 6 is 14, plus 1 is 15. Here I did 6 plus 1, which is 7. 7 plus 8 is 15. So regardless of what order I put them in, I should still get the same answer, no matter which grouping I do first, rather. So 6 plus 1 plus 3, 6 plus 1 plus 3. I'm going to get the same answer. Same with if I used it algebraically with variables. And again, the most important part is that we keep the numbers in the same order. Okay, distributive property. This is one that you should be familiar with from last year. The distributive property is when we multiply the value outside of the parentheses to each value inside the parentheses. And here's when we're going to start to simplify expressions. So an example would be 6 times n plus 1. Now I have to multiply both terms inside. So that becomes 6 times n plus 6 times 1. That ends up being 6n plus 6. I can do 7 times 2n plus 4. Now remember, draw your arrows so you know that you have to multiply both terms inside that factor. So 7 times 2, so that would be 7 times 2n plus 7 times 4. 7 times 2 would be 14n plus 28. That's the one we're going to be doing a lot of work with this year. Okay? 4 more. The identity property of 0. This is the sum of any number in 0 and the number stays the same. When you say identity, your identity does not change. So we don't want the identity of our number to change. So if we want that number to stay exactly the same when we're adding, then we're going to add it to a 0. So if I have 3 plus 0, that's going to equal 3. My number doesn't change. If I have 0 plus 8, that's still going to stay 8. The identity of that number does not change. It stays the same. If I add a variable, the variable is going to stay the same. So the identity property of multiplication is pretty much the same thing. What number times a value is going to equal that same value? And that number would be 1. So if I say 4 times 1 is equal to 4, the identity of my number does not change. 7 times 1 equals 7. The identity of my number does not change. 1 times b is going to equal b. So any number multiplied by 1, the number will remain the same. It will not lose its identity. Now the additive inverse of a number, and we talked about opposites in the beginning of the school year. Any number added to itself, its negative or its opposite, is going to give you 0. So if I have 6 plus negative 6 that's going to equal 0. Negative 2 plus a positive 2 is going to equal 0. A plus negative A, and I'm only putting parentheses around that to separate that plus sign from the negative sign, and that's going to also equal 0. So when you are adding opposites together, you are going to end up with 0. And the last one is the multiplicative inverse of a number. Multiplicative means multiply. That is when we are going to multiply by its reciprocal. Okay, we're going to multiply by its reciprocal. So multiply by the reciprocal. So if I have 2 times 1 over 2. Now remember, I can make this into a fraction by putting it over 1. Then that's going to give me 2 over 2, which is equal to 1. If I multiply 3 over 2 times its reciprocal, which is 2 over 3, that would get me 6 over 6, which is equal to 1. And it also works with variables. If I have a times 1 over a, and remember I could put that over 1 to make it into a fraction, I would end up with a over a, which is equal to 1.